I'm the fourth director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. It is, as far as we know, the longest study of adult life that's ever been done. It's followed the same individuals for 85 years, starting from the time they were teenagers all the way into old age. Most of them have passed away. We're now studying their children. It started in 1938 as two separate studies. One study of Harvard College sophomores brought in at age 19, chosen by their deans from the classes of 1939 to 1942. There were 268 of them, and they were brought in to study normal young adult development, the transition from adolescence to young adulthood. The other study was begun at Harvard Law School by Sheldon Gluck, a Harvard Law professor, and his wife, Eleanor Gluck, a social worker. They were interested in juvenile delinquency, and particularly in why some children from really disadvantaged homes managed to stay on good developmental paths and did not become juvenile delinquents. So they were chosen from homes known to 5 social service agencies for major familial and social problems. 456 of them originally. So originally, those two studies were separate. Then they were brought together by my predecessor, George Valiant, who was the third director, to make 724 original men. When I came on 20 years ago, we brought in all the wives of the original men, and then we reached out to their children. 1,315 of their children, mostly baby boomers, more than half of whom are women. So now we have over 2,000 people, more than half of whom are women in this study. The core of the study was a questionnaire sent to each person every 2 years. And the questionnaires asked about the big domains of life. So asked them about mental health, physical health, relationships, including intimate relationships, but also friendships, and work life, including work satisfaction, but also whether you got promoted, whether you got fired, what your salary was, and then lots of other questions about happiness, about who you voted for in each presidential election. So many other random questions as they occurred to each study director along the way. So those were the questionnaires. Then about every 10 years, we went to their homes and interviewed them, sat down in person for 3 or 4 hours and did a long interview with each person. And then gradually, when I came on, we began videotaping couples talking to each other. We began drawing blood for DNA. We scanned brains to look at how people respond to stressful experiences and looking at happy pictures and distressing pictures, all of those things. We used all the methods that we could that were relevant to human well-being as those different methods came online. We knew that in order to keep people participating with us, they needed to trust that what they tell us will never be revealed. And what we see, in studying all these lives is that relationships build that kind of safety net, that kind of foundation that gets us through all kinds of hard times, as well as provides, fun and joy and interest and all that. Almost every life we studied, of the thousands of lives, had significant challenges, right? And so that was the truth of these lives, and we wanted to include that in part to make sure people understand that that's basically the norm for everybody. Well, and that's one of the things that the study has really shown, that that childhood matters a lot, and that people who have warm childhoods can grow up quite poor and disadvantaged, but have very solid foundations of well-being from warm, consistent relationships. And you can be the most privileged person in the world and be quite starved for warmth and solid relationships. And that can set you up for a life of misery. My psychoanalytic training was focused on psychological development from the time we're infants, right? All the way into adulthood. So I was really interested in those issues. And it informs the kind of questions we ask. So we started studying secure attachment in older adults. My predecessors were really foresighted in that in 1948, they sent everybody a questionnaire asking about detailed, war experiences. Did you see combat? Did you ever kill anyone? Did you ever see anyone killed? Were any of your friends killed? And then a long list of symptoms that we now know as the symptoms of PTSD. We found that the ones who could talk and the ones who had better relationships with their fellow officers and their fellow soldiers were less likely to develop PTSD. The other thing is that those who had warmer family relationships before they went to war were less likely to develop PTSD. So relationships and health are intertwined. They're interconnected. When we lose our physical health, it's harder to sustain relationships. I think that putting ourselves in situations where we connect with each other more is a helpful antidote to this malaise that we're all feeling and this isolation. It's something we talk about in the book. We call it social fitness. And we do that to draw the analogy with physical fitness. The idea that with physical fitness, like if you work out today, you don't go home and say, good, I'm done. I don't ever have to do that again. It's a practice, right? It's ongoing. And similarly, what we would like to convey is this idea that tending to our relationships is an ongoing practice. So what I've had to learn, I didn't used to do that. I just thought, my friends are my friends, and if it's a good relationship, it'll take care of itself. And what we've learned is that doesn't happen. That perfect good relationships can wither away from neglect. And so what we wanted to be sure we included were the stories of real people for whom that wasn't true, where they thought, I'm never going to have decent relationships in my life. And then it changed. And so the message is, you just don't know what's going to happen. We found it, and there are other studies too, of studies of meaning and purpose in life that find that investment in causes beyond the self, beyond the me and mine kind of sphere, are more rewarding. They make people feel like their lives are more meaningful than the people who are just buying their third vacation home and their latest sports car and all that. That stuff turns out to be really quite empty, and that this investment beyond the self really matters. So could be investing in a cause like Class Act does, that has these wonderful causes. It could be, investing in mentoring younger people. It could be investing in your grandkids. It could be, so many things, just something beyond the self, and something that you want to live in the world beyond you because you were here. That seems to be a huge source of well-being. Maybe just stating the obvious, but it's useful, which is that nobody's happy all the time. Because even though we know that, and God knows by the time we get to be this age, we know that, but it's possible to imagine, especially when you look at somebody else's social media feed, you can imagine that other people have it all figured out, that they're the ones always at nice parties or on beautiful beaches, or, they're always happy, because we curate our lives for each other and we show each other our happy times. Nobody's happy all the time. And I just want to name that because it's possible that we can have this suspicion that if we're not happy all the time, it's because we're doing something wrong. And that's just not the truth. Well, I'd say that friendship builds this bedrock of well-being, that friendship is not easy, it's messy, that relationships of any consequence have disagreements that need to be worked through often, that friendships are this kind of constantly evolving thing where each person is constantly changing, so the relationship needs to change. And so I would say that the importance of friendship is in how much benefit it conveys for our emotional and physical well-being, but also its complexity, that it takes a lot of work to keep relationships vibrant. I think to sit down and take stock of what you have in your social life, in your relationship life, what you might want more of, and then see where you could strengthen the relationships you already have, and also put yourself in situations where you're likely to make new relationships.